Many of the most iconic franchises throughout history have those reoccurring characters, you know, specific key players that have a distinct appeal about them. They often present us with over-the-top personalities, unique character traits, or even superhuman capabilities that differentiate them from the rest of the pack. Whatever special qualities they may possess, we often find ourselves gravitating towards that wow factor they exhibit, only further accentuating their character appeal. We often find similarities in these specific characters that make them relatable to us, perhaps certain qualities or ideologies which we ourselves take pride associating ourselves with. In some instances, they may even become a placeholder for our own inner avatars, a model that we strive to be, thus making these portrayals feel larger than life. So when it comes to marketing an upcoming release, we as creators often have an idea for a specific character to lead the charge in that upcoming expedition, and if they fill those expectations over time, they often go on to become ambassadors for the brand. A strong mascot character can make or break a company's rise to prominence. Hey, just ask our old buddy Alex Kidd about that. He couldn't get his act together forever and a day. By the end of his stint across the Master System, Sega was about ready to huck his ass right out of existence. Luckily for him, a blue hedgehog came to town and saved him from getting roboticized into Eggman's army. You get the gist here more or less, but more importantly, this is a prime example of why marketing is so vital to a company. So it's easy to see today why Nintendo continues to have that mainline appeal about them. It's their diverse cast of characters and timeless IPs that have made them transcend video games entirely, crossing over into movies, theme parks, and any form of entertainment you can get your hands on. Nintendo managed to enter our hearts and homes better than anyone before them, and as time progressed into the 4th and 5th generations of home consoles, they taught many of us a valuable lesson. As next-gen graphics was all the rage, yet Nintendo still stood tall even in their darkest days. Which is why I feel if we ever did have another video game crash, I'm fairly confident the plumber's services would still be in high demand, which again is why I can be extra critical of his presence at times, especially when he keeps serving me that same dish of cold spaghetti, because again, I know how great Nintendo can be when they need to be. Which only proves why Nintendo has positioned themselves today as the Walt Disney of gaming, and sooner than later, I'm sure there will be plans to cryogenically freeze old Miyamoto deep under Nintendo HQ for a future revival in an unspecified future timeline. With that being said, I can't give Nintendo all the credit. Throughout the height of the console wars, every major gaming company seemed to be putting their artists to work looking for the next big breakout star to usher their studio into the future, and while on the subject of Sunsoft as of late, they too were no exception. Why Sunsoft, you ask? Well, we just so happen to be knee-deep in a retrospective of sorts, involving their earliest works across the NES, so I only figured it'd be fitting to bring up our next guest while continuing down this rabbit hole of mad mascots. As around this time, Sunsoft was hard at work, looking to make a name for themselves across the gaming scene, and what better way to establish that brand recognition than their own lead mascot? We've recently covered a few of the more niche characters like Mr. Gimmick and Yakopu of Trip World, yet the next Sunsoft treasure was more a direct response to that growing brand appeal, and thus the not-so-legendary bird of Sunsoft was born. The name's Hebereke, but you can call him Hebby for short. I'm sure if you scrolled through a curated list of early 8 and 16-bit JP exclusives, his name has popped up on occasion, and if his character intrigue managed to scratch his way past the surface, you'll find that just about every game in his franchise has a distinct style about them. I guess they were testing the waters quite a bit at Sunsoft, which may explain why they were so hesitant to release these games stateside. Look, after you've saved the princess on a few occasions, a game of golf or tennis is warranted, but only after a significant amount of Goomba stopping has taken place. Yet, much like the stigma placed upon Gimmick and Friends, the sheer quirkiness of this cast suffered that same fate, seeing a small release outside Japan, exclusive to a select few PAL territories. Although a prototype would eventually see the light of day, localization outside Japan started shaping up to look slightly different in an effort to appeal to a wider audience. These changes were largely aesthetic, but the alterations were done under the assumptions of how these characters may go on to be perceived. Look, Sunsoft, you really should have hit up your 6-year-old boy at that time. I mean, we could have talked things over to get the ball rolling here stateside. Come on now. These changes would temporarily shape the very fabric of the Sunsoft universe, with Hebereke staying behind in Japan to represent the Famicom. while the rest of fans around the world would be introduced to the short-lived career of the little fella which would come to be known as Bop Louie, a tale of two heroes that, depending on what part of the world you lived, would embark on a race to find the face who would eventually go on to run this place known as Sunsoft, as we tell the tale of a place we call Ufouria. Now, before we dive deeper into this story, we need to take a step back and assess this Hebereke, and after 2 separate playthroughs of this, I believe I have the scoop on him. So what's there to say about this dude outside all his witty dialogue? Well, for starters, he's a real asshole, constantly breaking the fourth wall and talking out of pocket. Not to mention, the name Hebereke loosely translates to the term drunk or untrustworthy, so wow, talk about starting out on the wrong foot, especially when playing a game centered around friendship. Well, for a better understanding of where this juvenile behavior stems from, we need to take a trip back to this dude's homeworld, one that has slowly fallen on hard times, now quickly spiraling into chaos. We soon discover that Heby's solar system was once a peaceful suburb inside the Sunsoft universe, a galaxy that literally collapsed in on itself when a foreign invasion was waged on his home front, causing a planetary meltdown. The effects of this interstellar event caused a tear in the very fabric of space and time, creating a temporal rift and throwing Heby into this all-new reality. Look man, I have no clue what the hell is going on here. I can only hope that I've made things a bit more digestible for you all by putting that Rockin' Cat twist on things. I tried to tell you this dude is full of shit anyway, so he's probably trolling us harder than last time. Nevertheless, awakening to a brand new plane, Heby downplays the events unfolding before him. However, he soon realizes he's alone here, quickly setting out in search of his so-called friends from back home, in hopes to get to the bottom of these catastrophic events. Yet, with the universe now thrown out of whack, this tear in space and time creates 2 alternate timelines, the one Heby has fallen into, and another still waiting to be discovered. A separate parallel event unfolding, perhaps a timeline that existed if Heby would have got his shit together. One that mirrors Heby in mind and body, only now with a soul. Lighthearted and upbeat, yet every bit as frosty in delivery. This universe is home to the story of Bop Louie. Let me be the first to say, what isn't there to love about this design? He's got that winter wonderland feel to him, like a youthful spirit frolicking in the snowfields, hyped up to go on a journey with his best buds. To me, he gives off the presence of a snowman, as if it's Christmas year-round back in Ufouria. He's got a heart of gold, unlike that penny-pinching Heby, whom is only looking out for himself. An alternate telling of said events, now coinciding with Heby's, born from this newly formed time paradox, a mirrorland that so many gamers around the globe will come to know as Ufouria, or as I like to call it, the Fourvia. This story opens up to much of the same chaos that led to the horrific events of Heby's world, only how we get there plays out slightly differently here, now through the eyes of Bop Louie, whom stumbles upon a crater with his 3 amigos. A massive excavation site of this diameter doesn't just appear out of thin air, and just as quickly as Louie's companions drop in to help assess the matter further, they find a way to get pulled into this massive void, as if a magnetic force drew them down inside, vanishing without a trace. Louie follows in pursuit of his missing friends, but he too succumbs to the present force, pulling him deep into the pit below, rematerializing into his own personal reality. Our 2 heroes' diverging timelines now run side by side in sync, trapped to the consequences of their own realities, as Heby and his frosty double now appear to be lost to space and time, now in search of their missing friends. Whatever formed this crater back in Ufouria is strictly speculative, but I have a hunch it may be due to the same interstellar beings who waged war back in Heby's homeworld. So, going forward, I'm putting on my tinfoil hat, theorizing that these 2 events occur simultaneously at the same moment in time, only traveling in opposite directions, separated by the temporal rift. So in theory, if we eliminate the potential threat that's now multiplied by these 2 newly formed moments in space, they may realign through the laws of physics. Man, what's up with these Sunsoft stories, always so dark and dreadful, with their world-ending story plots? You would never imagine characters of this caliber would endure such madness. Now, since these 2 worlds appear to be drifting further apart, I can't help but to feel it's now up to me to bring them back together. I'm like a marionette, trying to give gifts and give life to the fallen. So with no time to spare, let's break down these storied events using the in-game clues to rescue our dudes, because even a douche like Hebi can change his ways when the right opportunity is presented. He just needs that reality check to do right by his friends, rerouting him onto the righteous path. As you stretch those fingers for a firm feel for these controls, you lead off by navigating uncharted lands, hopping and bopping along the path of your choosing. While doing so, be sure to hold down that D-pad of yours, saying hello to the angry locals by locking out those long legs of yours for a swift curb stomp to the old noggin, transforming these magical misfits into living projectiles we call papoons. They're the equivalent of a freshly picked turnip from Mario 2, only of the larger GMO variety that quickly puts a hurtin' on incoming enemies. This will be your primary attack moving forward, which is complemented by various quality of life upgrades you uncover as we venture ahead. A Sunsoft inspired scavenger hunt filled with the essentials. At the very top left hand corner of your screen, you will find your health meter, which may be expanded upon with those resourceful life containers, which you may refill by scooping up those sweet recovery crystals that pop up from time to time when delivering those brutal bops that make them drop. These rarities, along with a few flavored potions, or what Bop Louie likes to call the water of life, will be your go-tos for optimal recovery throughout this endeavor. Just be sure to seek them out sooner than later, because newcomers to these parts might get a bit overwhelmed at the start, ducking various degrees of shit served up to them as you track down those that lay claim to this realm. For an early 8-bit Metroidvania, this is quite exceptional, and just like Samus, it's going to be quite the hike before you get those nifty upgrades needed to make some real ground here. Oh, and speaking of Metroid, if you need to step away for a breather, Sunsoft's got you covered with an easy-to-use password system. Hold up, pause for a sec. Look, I'm gonna stop you right there. Can we please put this Metroidvania terminology to rest? This is essentially Metroid, okay? There's no gothic undertones attached to these characters, or any overarching themes of the sorts. And as far as role-playing elements go, they were sparsely used in Castlevania prior to Symphony of the Night. These traditional RPG elements were adopted across many early computer games well before it became prevalent in the Castlevania franchise. Besides, this is a Turtroidvania. I already recoined the phrase, so don't make me go back on my word and call this a U-Turtroidvania, because now it just sounds like I'm using turd vernacular, and we don't frolic in feces here. As you search these lands from top to bottom, memories come flooding back, reminiscing on those fun times together with friends. As you now look to reunite with the fearless Ochan, you'll have some explaining to do if you wish to squash that beef. This is easier said than done, because your old partner in crime appears to have a score to settle with you, and it's moments like this that will show you why these friendships last the test of time. Remember, as these two scuffle back and forth, their events run parallel to those of Bop Louie's, when the moment the gang fell deep into that giant crater back in Ufouria. However, the ramifications mirror those of Hebi's, causing his buddies' minds to become every bit as fuzzy. Louie must now confront his loyal pet dragon and knock some sense back into him. Well, it doesn't look like either of them are out for blood here, as this back and forth banter looks about as deadly as a late night pillow fight, clobbering each other with one of those giant squishmallows you found roaming the countryside. You will take turns walloping one another, kicking up enough momentum to get a clean shot off, like a swift game of dodgeball, scurrying back on offense for a ball retrieval as you quickly regroup to get more licks in. Your opponent will always favor the ball over all else, so if you play your hand just right, you can use the walls to your advantage for an easy game of keep away, slingshotting the ball back into your hands to score the point and grab the rebound every time. You know, watching these two bicker back and forth brings back memories. Even the best of friends fight sometimes, but it's how you handle those scuffles that builds those lifetime bonds going forward. Running it back like old times, our duo sets off on a Goonies-sized adventure chock full of endless surprises, new rivalries, and rekindled friendships that offer their own unique list of expertise to navigate the many new challenges that wait them. Although the differences between these two releases are minor in the grand scheme of things, I still often gravitate to my man with the frosty flow. Shoot, even those piss-filled pigeons don't want any. Dropping anvils down below for a one-and-done ordeal. See, even they knew Hebi was completely full of shit. Louie sporting every bit the arsenal of tricks that Hebi has, only he looks so much cooler doing so, especially when tackling that icy cold moveset. He must also dabble a bit in the heavy metal genre, headbanging along the way, which enables him access to those high traffic areas. He's the real MVP here, but even the best of the best don't reach the top of the summit without a little assistance. So, he's not coming alone now that he's reunited with his faithful companion, one which would make Lance of the Elite Four proud. Meet Freon Leon, Louie's own personal reptar, whom also has his very own performance on ice. He's a bit larger in stature than his feline counterpart, giving you a bit more room to sink those claws down into your prey. However, don't let that wide frame fool you. He's every bit as versatile and moves far quicker than he leads onto. A noticeable upgrade in speed from Ochan, and although both are fantastic, being a cat dad myself, I can't deny the sheer presence of Freon, especially with that tiny horn crowned atop his head and that gnarly ice breath of his. Speaking of companions, besting our boy Shades in battle will be critical for clearing those large stretches that aren't attainable otherwise. The ghost with the most, whom perhaps was a fallen friend taken from us too soon in a previous lifetime. He's cool, calm, and collective, like the kid you took a liking to whom had all the good NES games growing up. Still though, he can be a real teenage delinquent when need to be, luring those blacked out shades for a swift mean muggin', throwing these thugs right off their game. He's got this intimidation factor about him, and in all seriousness, would you F around with a ghost kid? I'm just saying. There's also Gil, the anglerfish? Looks more like a plankton to me. He's like the oddball of the group, joining our crew with no rhyme or reason, like the rest of us outcasts here. Let's just say he's got his own unique lists of talents, not like the valedictorian of your class per se, but more like the kid that ate one too many paper footballs and enjoys sticking his gum under his desk at school. He's a man of very few talents and even fewer words. However, when he does speak, it's quite useful, vomiting up some explosives to clear the way while using his amphibian-esque qualities to navigate the ocean depths, so sure, why not come along for the ride? Gil's talents will also factor in late game due to being the fourth and final team member you track down, making him feel even more of an afterthought. He's needed for many late game scenarios, which are blocked by armored access points that will require him to spit up his lunch in order to lead you ahead. He's like the guy you can only hang with for short amounts of time. You love the dude, but after a while, things just begin to feel awkward between you two, and your social clock will start to run out by the time he joins the team. Again, as you traverse the various landmarks, you're switched back and forth between your teammates, pawing or clawing across the icy tundra, cooling your foes down to the core as you scale this winter wonderland. Each area has a unique theme, and those whom settle into them are precisely placed like a perfect puzzle piece ready to be solved. So again, if you think you might just be able to do this alone, you'll soon be reminded of the theme song, The Power of Love, hilariously recapturing your failures over and over again till you seek help. Think you can reach that ledge? Yeah, let me know how that works out for you. Sometimes you need a ghost kid to do, well, ghost things, wiggling on by for some paranormal fun. It's also satisfying when you do discover the right setup, giving you a far greater sense of accomplishment. It's not overly done in the slightest, with minimal backtracking at best, and mandatory items for entry are few and far between. At least when it's done so, it feels more so due to hardware limitations in comparison to lazy stage design. Ufouria allows the player to switch between characters in a way in which it never feels like a chore, quickly and efficiently, unlike another Fantastic Four I'm awfully familiar with, and as the band slowly reforms, you'll inevitably discover the underlying plot. The galactic invasion which plagues your homeworld continues to grow, and as it does, so the outrage stewing inside the locals, some now entrusted with the opposition's own personal plans for these lands. 3 keys entrusted to reform the loyal subjects that lie buried within the confines of this planet, which need to be tracked down in order to break the seal placed on this place. That seal being where the mother of all creatures resides, deep inside the planet's core, locked behind a gateway inside the central shrine. As you track down these keys, you'll befriend the locals, doing your due diligence for those in need, whom in return will aid you along your quest. As each key is acquired, you'll slowly start to right the wrongs of a broken universe, beginning to put the pieces back together and steer this ship back on course. With all the power-ups and trinkets you collect on the way, you'll find the confidence needed to overcome the odds, climbing the highest mountain by putting on an exhibition of heroics to bring a little joy to a once prominent world. And you know, maybe a little bit of that snowman magic rubbed off on even the coldest of hearts, as our two heroes find themselves racing towards the same destination, now with their respective keys in hands to open a portal back to their homeworlds. As the two stand in the middle of the void, the ground around them begins to tremble as a large entity rises from the rubble, appearing to have been sucking the very life from this planet, now bearing a surprise gift in the form of a tiny hellspawn, quickly brought forth to do the Queen's bidding. As Hebe and Louie battle this beast across their respective timelines, they simultaneously engage in the hero's trial, maneuvering past this tiny green creature while additionally baiting it in as means for ammo to launch back at the Queen. As you go toe-to-toe with this symbiotic relationship, focus in on the creature's core, which is conveniently lit up like a bullseye to indicate a weak point. While our heroes' timelines surge across reality, they instantaneously begin to shift inwards towards one another as if they share this affinity for greatness, binded by fate to rewrite those wrongs with every blow to the creature's core. As their courage grows, so does this affinity for triumph. And although these two couldn't feel any more like polar opposites, their courage proves they're every bit the same, unifying as one under a common goal as their timelines now reunite, slowly intertwined, becoming whole once more, dealing a death blow to the Queen as our two teams now find themselves on a collision course with destiny as she crashes down below into the planet's rich sediment. With justice served, our two heroes stand united with their respective parties as our timelines begin to reassemble, bringing this journey to an end. In Hebe's ending, he's still every bit the jackass of old, brushing these events off as if no big deal, bidding his buddies farewell in the most backhanded way imaginable, looking to make his departure back home, leaving his crew high and dry. Meanwhile, in Bop Louie's world, the team regroups, reminiscing on their recent journey before heading back to Ufouria. However, just as they begin to do so, Louie's friends stress that the four of them should stay behind in this new world, one at peace that would make for a great place to grow old. Bop, being the Louie that he is, insists he must go back to Ufouria as it'd be the right thing to do, informing his friends he will always remember them. Yet, interestingly enough, as both heroes' stories close, a surprise twist occurs in the next moments that pass, finding Hebe turning his ship back around and informing the team that it appears as if he's been home this entire time. Perhaps he was trolling and his dumbass made up the entire story from the start, or maybe this was his way of finally coming around, seeing the errors of his ways. What's even more intriguing is the way this parallels Louie's ending, finding our guy also making a shocking return, coming to the realization that returning to Ufouria without his friends isn't a world he wishes to live in at all, choosing to live out the remainder of his time in this new realm, as his timeline indeed would end here, merging back into the world of Hebereke, as time only continues forward. Although this tale of Bop Louie was simply a fun retelling for localization of Hebereke, it's still fun to theorize on today's events with a fun twist on these revisions. As our time with Bop Louie would in fact come to an end, the Hebereke franchise would continue forward as our core four would share the spotlight on many more occasions, taking on various roles as they would help usher Sunsoft into the next generation. With that said, I believe many of us NES diehards have a fond appreciation for this short-lived character, one that was a product of the changing landscape that became the video game boom of the 90s. A character that at a moment in time granted a broader audience outside Japan a way to learn a bit more about Japan's rich culture, often seen portrayed across many early Famicom games. Thus, not only treating us to a unique retelling of Hebereke, but gave us our own personal experience here, along with unique characters. Regardless how you interpret these changes, I for one adore them, and again, who wouldn't want a pet dragon coming along for the ride? I mean, we would in fact get our very first Charizard a couple years later. After 50 episodes, you probably have a better understanding of my personality, along with the games and characters that interest me. I believe that's reflected in many of my reviews, and although they're not for everyone, we all have different tastes and opinions, which is why I feel this particular story is one that's even more relatable. It's why I love this early period in gaming so much, as a large portion of these story elements were left to the player to interpret, sparking the imagination to run wild and being able to creatively approach the artistic direction of one's work by leaving room for the player to speculate on these specific events. Which brings me to why I love to tell these stories from my perspective with you all. You, the player, see the world differently when the conditions allow you to fill those logic gaps in, creating a greater bond with those characters. And you know, a little part of me believes that the spirit of Bop Louie lives on in all of us. See you next time, gang.